I'm Josh Baer. Our guest today, David Mugrabi. Some of you know David and his family for being fantastic art collectors, art investors, art dealers, art addicts. David came to the art business first. Most people don't know this, but he did play third base for the Mets until he hurt his arm. And then he was in Wall Street doing some finance, and now he's part of the family business. So thank you, David, for being here.
Thank you, Josh. So Josh is the author of the Baer Faxt and an art advisor and a bit of a collector himself. So welcome.
Now, before we get started, I always like to have a little sense of who's in the audience. If you're an artist, could you raise your hand? Okay. If you're an art collector, can you raise your hand? If you're an arts professional, raise your hand. If you got lost and you thought that this was the lunchroom, raise your hand. So, okay, we got one for there. So he got trapped here. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion without a lot of preparation about what's going on in the art business now. And at a certain point, we'll also take questions from the audience so we can try to get an idea of what you're interested in. So maybe it helps for those people who don't know too much about David and his family if you give a brief synopsis of the history of the Mugrabi family with art, and you're 25 years at it.
So my father started collecting by accident 25 years ago. He had an account in New York, and the banker would call him up and tell him, Mr. McGraw, you have some money sitting in your money market. Would you ever be interested in investing in art? And this went on for about a year, and this was Jeffrey Deitch at Citibank. And he wasn't really interested at the time, but after a lot of persistence and a lot of cold calling, one day he decided to buy something, and they sent it over, opened the crate, loved it, and very soon after, he was hooked. You know, the hardest piece to buy is the first one, and once you get started, unfortunately, it's all downhill from there. So, and the rest is history. You know, here we are.
Do you think of in the beginning, when I first knew about you guys, I thought of you all as collectors.
We were.
And then at some point you made a transition to what would you call it? Would you say investors, dealers? What was the next transition, and why did that happen?
I think as people start collecting and buying more than they can hang, eventually they get storage. But that's a little wasteful sometimes, so people decide to sell some of their work and upgrade or change, or their taste evolves and they change. And instead of staying with everything, sometimes you end up selling things, and that's what ends up happening to many collectors today. They end up buying more than they can hang, and they start selling it. And then coming from Colombia, where we were, and the situation there was pretty terrible at the time, so my father was commuting back and forth, and he saw that there was an opportunity in art, and it was pretty lucrative. So he decided to go ahead and called Jeffrey and came back to New York, and I'd like to go to the sales. And before he knew it, he had too many pieces, and he started buying impressionist and modern art. And over time, his taste evolved and got into contemporary, and people were telling him, Jose, you're crazy, you're buying all this garbage, and you should be buying just the modern and impressionist. But he really liked the next generation of artists, which at the time was Warhol and de Kooning and Pollock and Lichtenstein, the real bad stuff that people didn't like that back then in the late 80s. You know, everybody was still into like Cézanne, Matisse, Monet, Picasso, which they're great, but you couldn't get the greatest examples of these artists at the time without spending too much money. And you could still buy the great contemporary artists and the great examples by them. So it became pretty obvious to him that he should start buying the next generation of artists. And that's what he did. It worked out well for the first few years as the market in the 80s, late 80s was doing great. And then the music stopped in the 90s, early 90s, you know, with when the market kind of took a break. So for a little while, people, you start second guessing if what you're doing is the right thing to do. But he was passionate about it. He liked the way he had gone, and over time, he saw that he did the right thing. And a lot of the same people that went up to him and told him that what you're buying today is junk, over the next 10 years, went back and said, Jose, you're a genius, how'd you see this? But for him, it was very clear. It wasn't something that was, he didn't think he was doing anything that wasn't obvious to everybody, but I guess it wasn't. And it will be the same, I guess, moving forward.
But at some point, he changed from a collector really to how would he identify himself? Would he say, now, I'm a collector, I'm a dealer, I don't know, it doesn't matter?
I think all dealers are collectors, if you think about it. I mean, we don't buy things with somebody else in mind. When we buy something, it's because we love it, because we like it, because we want to own it. And that's normal, I think that once you do buy a bunch of things and you start selling stuff, the market sees you as a dealer because you're no longer just buying and living with it and putting it away. Now you're actually actively buying and selling. So in our case, at least, it was, he started as a collector and it took him a few years to start selling. And it all happened again because a friend of his at the time said, Jose, you've bought so many things. Have you ever considered selling them? And he goes, no, I really never thought about selling anything, but what he said to him is like, what I've been trying to explain to you is that things have appreciated over the last five years and you should look into it. So he looked into it, sold a few things, and like I said, it was a very lucrative investment at the time, and we were actually in moving countries, and he didn't want to go back and forth in the textile business where he was in Colombia, so this became something that he saw that he could do as a business as well, and that's when he started buying to sell.
Did you know as a kid that you wanted to go in this business, or you went into Wall Street to like get lessons to apply to art, or did you try to escape this business? How about your own path as the prince of this, one of the two boy princes?
I know that this was something that I liked all along. I was fortunate enough to go to the sales and go to see museums and be involved with art from a very early age, but I definitely wanted to try something different. I never saw this as being my primary ideal business. So I went into finance at the beginning and did that for a little while, learned some things in another field, and got fortunate enough, sold my company at the time, and didn't know what to do. And my father's like, listen, why don't you come back? Because at the beginning it was very difficult working in the family business. He's not an easy guy, so. And so I went back to school a little bit just to get a little more experience because my brother had been in the business for the last 8 years. And when I came out with a bit of an art education, more of an education than I had had for my first growing up with it, and I used to be able to stand in front of a painting and speak about it and place it in historical context and say what the artist might have been thinking, what my father calls nonsense. I'm talking in front of the painting. He goes, "That's bullshit." You have to feel it. It's in the gut. You can't explain art. Either you like it or you don't. And if you have to explain something to someone, then they shouldn't buy it. They have to feel it. They have to like it. It's not something that you got to explain too much. And if they don't see it, then move on. Don't buy it. So.
But ideally, you get both.
I did both.
Yeah, you want to feel it and learn something, right?
I mean, yes. I mean, in most cases, you'd like to do that, but as it came for him, it wasn't something that he went to school. He wasn't really educated in art. It wasn't. He learned on his own. He learned through experience. He learned through looking at books, but he never took an art class. He never went to
let's
a
get
lecture. He never did any of this stuff.
Let's get to today and what's going on. Parenthetically, when it seemed to me, let's talk about the investment, the speculator, the flipping thing. A lot of people are here probably curious about that because that's been the big topic for the last, 6 months or a year. And parenthetically, I don't know if anybody from Art Basel is here. How many people have heard of Stefan Simkowitz? Or read it? Okay. So when I was approached for this panel originally, in the winter, I said to them, hey, why don't we get this guy, Stefan Simkowitz, to do this thing? And Art Basel go, who's that? Okay? Now, fast forward, and then I arranged for David to do it. And then they're saying, hey, remember that Stefan guy? Why don't we get him? It's like, you blew it. It's too late. So that idea of the art as investment and speculation is really big in people's mind now for what's going on. Do you see a difference in terms of investing in art and speculating in art, buying art to sell and then selling it and flipping it? Is there a fundamental difference in your mind?
I mean, I don't buy art to flip. I don't suggest people buy art to flip. You know, you buy art because you love it and you hope that it appreciates. Needless to say, if it does, you're going to like it better. It's pretty sad to see when somebody buys something and it performs and then it underperforms and it's worth less than what they paid, how their emotions and their feelings towards the piece changes. The piece doesn't change. It's the perception of the people that changes because the piece is done when it's done. And if it appreciates, they're like, oh, look how great, my so-and-so, and they love it more, and they talk about it. And when it's the opposite and it goes down in price, they're like, oh, I really don't like it anymore. And they find reasons to not like it as opposed to like the work. So in general, what I would tell anybody is if you're going to buy art, you should buy something that you love. And yes, where the prices have gotten to today, people are definitely going to have to start thinking, look, I mean, I can buy this.
But you're in the business of buying art and selling art.
Absolutely.
So is that somehow, and you have a very clean reputation. Some of these other people who are accused of being flippers have a very murky reputation. Is there a real difference, or what's the difference in what you do and what they do, or the perception of it?
I mean, I guess people will buy art to flip if they think they can make money and make it fast, but that was never the way we operated.
Because they don't like what they're buying? Is that the difference?
I think a lot of people buy with their ears. You know, they buy because they hear that this artist is going to be the next something and that it's worth $20,000 and it's going to be worth $100,000, and so they'll take a position. They might buy more than they can. They'll overextend themselves to the point that they need to start selling it and selling it fast. And many times it works, but when it doesn't, it's not really pretty. So it's not the approach I would take to collecting. You know, it's not really what I would consider collecting.
So you have no strategy when you're going in that you need a rate of return of 30% a year and you're promising this and you have some formula, because I think some of these people who are doing that game are talking in those terms right away. What's it, ROI? I think that's return on investment. Do you ever think in those terms?
I don't think I've ever used that term in art ever. And I don't think it's something that I think about when I buy something. You try to buy it right. You try to buy what you think is going to be worth more money, but you're not like, oh, this should be 20% a year and look at it that way. You buy something again. Sometimes when you buy something, you sometimes have to pay more than you'd like to get that particular piece, because if you're buying something great, and most people know what great is, and especially if they own it, and they're not willing to sell it for what they think the correct market price is today, because they're not going to be able to replace something of that quality with the same money. And so if somebody's willing to part ways with a great piece, sometimes you have to pay to take it off their hands, and you have to pay a little more than what it's really worth. Obviously, the way that it's been with the market and the amount of new buyers and people coming into the market, we've been very fortunate that the market has been growing steadily and healthy, and so people have started to get a little speculative and buy art just for the wrong reasons. But I don't look at it that way. For me, it's...
Do people come to you and say, David, we met in Saint-Tropez, you were on my yacht, I'd like to put $20 million in art, I want to invest in that, what should I do? Do you get that question?
Not with the Saint-Tropez, yes. I have clients that come and they're like, I'd like to start collecting.
That's a different thing. I want to put, my asset allocation pie, I want to put some of it. Are they as blatant as that?
Art's become a bit of an asset class. You can't really separate again, the volume of money and the amount of money that people are buying art with is no longer a little, they're not just doing it as a side gig and they don't consider it investing. You can't separate what that money can do for you in another asset class as it will do for you in art. So people are going to look at it that way, and many people today, they might have a portfolio and they take their entire money and they say, okay, so I'm going to diversify some money into real estate, I'm going to put some money into art, I'm going to have some money in stocks and bonds. And yes, it's become an asset class that people actually think about, and they say, so I'm going to put 10% of my net worth into art or something to that effect. What should I buy?
Well, while we're here, since everybody will promise to keep this to ourselves, when people talk to us, they really want to know, what should I be buying? So if you want to give us a couple of names of who you should be buying, so just for everybody here, don't tell anybody else. The secret, because what they really want to know is what you bought yesterday that is going to be really great and worth more tomorrow. Isn't that what people mostly want to hear from you?
People want to hear who's the next Warhol, who's the next great big artist or something. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you exactly who the next big artist will be. You have to buy what you love. But I promise you there will be another Warhol, like there was another Picasso, and like there will be many more. It's just that today the field's become so broad and so big, and there are so many artists that you just have to tread a little bit more carefully. Obviously in the 90s, early 90s, I go back to that time, there were a lot of artists that were doing really, really well, and they were selling for a lot more money than they do today. And people were caught up with that a little bit, and 20 years later, they're seeing that they might have bought some of the wrong artists, and they're probably trading for something similar to what they paid, except that now it's 20 years later, and there's been many other artists that have appreciated.
So you're saying that's sort of a lesson to the people who are a little bit more speculative, that things actually sometimes go down?
Unfortunately, they do.
But if you've only been doing this for 5 years, things seem like they only go up, right? There's only one direction for everything.
What I like to tell my friends is that even though the market is very, very high, and again, it's because there's, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is because there's a lot of new collectors buying art. There's probably a lot more people buying today than there were 10 years ago and than there were 20 years ago. But I always find that there's value in the market. You might not find value buying the hot artist of today, and you might get caught up buying that artist, but there are pockets of value, and you don't necessarily have to speculate and go extremely young without telling you not to buy young, because again, like I said earlier, there will be a young artist today that will be just as big as the big artists that we hear about over the last 50 and 100 years. So I think that what I advise my friends is buy a little bit of, like if you're going to put, let's say, $100, you buy maybe $50 in established artists with a good track record that will be here forever. You'll buy 25 maybe in other artists that are also like young and up and coming, but have a little bit more. It's not like the very, very young. And it depends how much risk you want to take. You can buy some young artists and build a little portfolio very young. And if you buy, say, 10, 15, 20 names, you're going to get maybe lucky with one or two, and that will be good enough to cover your other 18, because not all 20 are going to work. But if
is
you love
that
them,
your strategy?
Everybody's different depending on how much risk they want to take. My strategy, I'm more conservative. So I like to go with the value in the established names.
Now, do you have 3 different strategies in this company? The David strategy, the Alberto strategy, and the Jose strategy? Or do you guys all have to...
Surprisingly, we do have a lot of different arguments and beliefs, but we do see eye to eye in many cases. I can't say everything because it's not true, and it's impossible for 3 different personalities to like everything that the other one likes. But for the most part, we do see eye to eye in many of the strategy.
I've noticed, as you were talking about starting in Impressions to Modern, I've noticed that you seem to be going back into those categories in the last few years for things that are modern versus contemporary. Is that you see that your taste changed, or you see them as being undervalued in the climate a hype of an Alex Israel at $1 million kind of
A
world?
little bit of both. You know, there's some. I mean, the nice thing about what we do is that we don't exclusively focus on a period. You know, we're not like, okay, just post-war and that's it. You know, like if we like something from the Impressionist period, or even from an Old Master period, we will go into that. You know, it's not about. We don't have like a creed that we have to stand by, and we only buy 1950 and up. You know, like it goes the gammon. If we like a piece, if we see value, if we want to live with it, we don't discriminate in that regard.
Well, are there any? You're obviously very well known for your holdings of Warhol, Basquiat, Hearst. Are there some others that you're like, that's somebody I'm so passionate about that I try to have as many as I can without revealing too much secret?
We have the luxury of being able to do that, you know, so we do have a lot of young artists that we like to buy in depth, and for us to buy one piece doesn't make sense, you know, so we're not looking to just buy a piece by an artist. When we get behind someone, we like to go deep and collect many different works and periods by the artist, so yes, there is some of that.
But you don't want to attach any names to that?
I don't think it's really relevant, but
Okay.
yeah.
Has Mugrabi become a brand?
Has it?
Well, we always talk about you as if you weren't people, but as if it was some entity. So if the Mugrabis are in it, that means something. It's almost like this brand. I think the galleries have become brands. The artists have become brands. They position themselves a bit as brands. I don't think you have a PR firm. You have a small staff. There's like, what, 6 of you or something?
That's right.
Instead of, you know, the galleries with 100. But are you a brand?
I mean, I don't know if it's a brand or not because we're not making anything. We're just buying what we like and standing behind what we like. So some people might view it as that. They feel very comfortable buying something that I guess Mugrabi has been buying. But it's not, again, I don't think that's the way to buy art. I think you buy what you like, and if it works for you and Mugrabi owns some of it, it's good for you. And if it doesn't, I mean, there's plenty of people that, obviously there's people that are selling what we're buying. So someone doesn't believe as much as we do in certain things because they're selling it. So,
Well, as an advisor, when I go to galleries, it's almost you get an inquisition of who's your client, what are they going to do with it, begging them to take your money. And it's not the most pleasant process for either side, I think, to go through that. And there's people who are frozen out, or they have a certain sort of reputation, deserved or not. Are you frozen out sometimes from galleries?
I think so. Sometimes they are afraid to sell to other dealers. I don't see why. I think we're better collectors than most. So for them to say, no, your dealers is a little bit silly. I mean, we buy and we hold and we sell sometimes, obviously, but I do get that sometimes, yes.
So you do get frozen out?
Yeah.
Do you always, when you buy something primary and you come to sell, do you always go back to the person you bought it from?
No.
No. Okay. Honest
No,
answer.
I don't think that a gallery should really be able to tell a buyer, listen, if you sell it, you have to give it to me. Excuse me, I bought it, it's mine. I could do whatever I want with it. You know, it's not their, but people honor it because, and I will honor it, but we just don't need to go through them to sell it, you know, like, it's not, and many galleries are okay with that, and many galleries call you up and cry a little bit about it, but it's okay, you know, if when the market's not so good, they'll be calling you to buy it, you know, so when you get shut out at the beginning and the market is great, they get to cherry pick who they want to sell it to, and many times you get left out, but unfortunately, they do sell to people who are also interested in turning a profit sometimes, you know? So a lot of times they might hold something and they end up selling it, you know? Like, it's not like they're married. I mean, these so-called collectors that they think they're selling to aren't necessarily usually what they think they are every time. You know, in some cases they are, and in many cases they're not, you know?
But do you pay attention to not so much, or I think for some of the other people, what you're doing with it, but how you do it, how you go about it? Would you buy an artist, a young artist in January, then put it in auction in May?
I mean, if I did that, it'd be for, I mean, I didn't like the piece, or I think that the market should see a public price about the piece as opposed to like keeping everything in the gallery. At the same time, these galleries like to complain that they're selling primary and that it's worth more down the road. But the only way that these prices that they get to like go up from what they're asking originally to like more money is when they see a public record. You know, how else can they price something for more money if they just keep selling it to the same 10, 15 people at the same price? I mean, so who sets the price? At least if there's a public market, there's other people involved in seeing what it's really worth, and if something's only worth what somebody else is willing to pay you for it. So as much
for a number of these artists, you are the market maker. You are the, you know,
No, but I mean,
in a sense that, and I think what people don't understand, if you're perceived as supporting Warhol for the sake of argument, you're using actual money to support that. You know, and if all the people you sold Warhols to didn't see you buying and bidding on more Warhols, they'd be like, well, they're good enough for me. Why aren't you backing it?
I mean,
so it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Support is, I mean, it's a term that is used, but it's not about supporting. I'm buying something that I like. I'm buying, whether it's a Warhol or some other artist at auction, like you pointed out, I have to pay for it. It's not like I'm bidding, and then you buy it and somebody else pays for it. I still have to buy it. So obviously, if I'm willing to pay that price for the piece and I buy it, it's mine, and I love having it. And you know, there's a risk involved. It's not just like support. You know, like I'm buying it, and it's something that we think about before going in, and something that we'd like to buy up to a certain price.
One more question, then I'll open for some questions. How do you get your information? I mean, there's just three of you. There's a million galleries.
My brother.
Your brother?
No, I'm kidding. I mean, we speak to a lot of people, you know. We have a lot of relationships, and we get around a little bit, you know. So as everybody, we read the Baer Faxt a little bit. We get some information from there. We go to the sales. We go to the fairs. There's usually a Mugrabi somewhere, you know. Like, it's not like you go to too many fairs or auctions. We've been around a long time, and we definitely try to cover the entire market, you know. So fortunate we're three of us.
I'd like to maybe open it up for a few minutes for questions. I hope there's some. If you have a question, we'll bring you a microphone. So does anybody have something and they want to ask? We'll share ours. He's got one. Okay.
Hey, I'm Josh, like you. I'm currently working on developing this platform. It's a social network, e-commerce platform meant to connect emerging artists with new buyers. And I was wondering what you guys thought about the emergence of all these online platforms, and whether they're here to stay, and which ones are here to stay, and if they're going to have a positive impact on the market or not.
Such as which?
Like Saatchi Online and Artsy and ArtSpace and ArtNet.
They have a use, you know. I mean, people use ArtNet a lot. And I think that with social media, people are very informed by, I mean, in many cases, you can see more on Instagram today than you can by sitting in your house or in your city. Obviously, not everybody goes to every fair, and if you go and you can see it, you could see what happened in Hong Kong, even though you're sitting in your office in New York. And so I think they're great. You know, they're great exposure for the market. It's again, it's a lot of people looking at stuff, a lot of people buying, and not everybody gets a chance to go everywhere. So it's a great way to get information.
I mean, I have a biased stake in this, in that I'm on the, I work for a company called eBay. Anybody heard of eBay? And eBay, you'll find in the next month or two, is going to try to take a major place in the art market. They have 145 million registered users, and we believe that we can make the art pie grow. And as my role with them is to try to create what that's going to be, I believe that there's a future in that place if we provide an experience that's compatible with the experience of looking and thinking about art. So And I believe we can do it in a way that's scalable, in ways that some of these, that you couldn't possibly at the beginning reach out to more than the people in this room. So, but I don't think it's the place that we're going to focus on selling $50 million objects, but maybe $15,000 objects. Another question?
Hello, I'm Pablo Gogol from Mexico City. I'd like to know, having come from Latin America, what are the holdings in Latin art, Latin masters, David?
I think in our case,
Yeah.
we have Botero, we have, I think it's very normal for people from wherever they come from to start collecting their artists first, and then they evolve and start collecting Western art, and now with the market and the world and technology becoming so small, that people now are capable of buying from many different countries different art. But I definitely have a Latin American exposure in art.
Good.
Alan?
Sorry? Yeah, Alain Servet. Wanted to know, you described quite well the scope of your art investing. Is there an element as well of developing the sharing of the art with the broader public in the Mugrabi family?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry?
Yeah,
It's saying about public sharing of the collection.
We're very generous in lending to institutions when we get requests most of the time. We definitely believe in sharing the art, and we have done many shows of some of our artists in different museums around the world.
Just say something about the Lever House collection.
There's also the Lever House art collection that we're involved with, which we commission living artists to do works of art for the building, and we exhibit it there for about 4 months.
That's ground floor space on Park Avenue and 53rd Street that's free, that probably has more attendance than almost anything.
I mean, there's a lot of foot traffic over there, so that gets a lot of eyes on it. And but I do believe that sharing the art, I mean, the art should be shared. People should be able to see the art, and we do help with that. I mean, if you look into it, we've done many shows around the world that show our pieces, and then we constantly lend our works to museums and different institutions if they request for it.
But traditionally, if somebody wanted to do a show of Artist X in Frankfurt, that gallery was coming to you, and half the works, you had a history of consigning works to hundreds of galleries around the world as a distribution outlet, so to speak.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's normal, because I don't know everybody in Frankfurt, unfortunately, and people don't know of us. So if a gallery in Frankfurt is doing a show and they want to borrow a piece or two, we'd be happy to work with them.
But now you do more retail than you used to 10 or 15 years ago to use.
Well, as the market evolves, that's been the case with us as well. We do deal with some end buyers. We do deal with some collectors, and a lot with the auction houses and other galleries, art advisors, dealers. We're pretty open.
Another question? Front row.
Hi, I'm Anders Modig, based here in Basel, but writing for Swedish newspapers. And if you look into the crystal ball a bit, given the fantastic development of the last 5 years in prices and buyers, can this hold up, or are we approaching a bubble?
I think it's something that's sustainable due to the fact that there is that much more money coming into the market, that many more collectors coming in. I don't know if you were here when the fair opened at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. People were elbowing their way in. You think that they're giving away the art as opposed to that they have to pay for it. And it's no different when you go to Miami or in Hong Kong, So to a certain extent, that's why the market's where it's at. It's very easy to people to chuck it up as a bubble and say that it's a bubble, but in reality, the market's quite efficient. There's been many artists that have corrected within the market and who were lofty at the time, but doesn't mean that the market in general is a bubble. You know, like there will be artists, like I said earlier, that probably will go down in price from where they are today over the next 5 to 10 years, no question about that. But there'll be other artists that will go up as well, you know. So overall, I think that due to the amount of new money, buyers, collectors, some speculators, I mean, the auction houses are, if you notice those books, they're like encyclopedias every season, yet they manage to do well. And again, it's just because there's that many more buyers today than there were over the last 10 and 15 and 20 years. And I
I think that's a question that only journalists and economics professors are interested in, because ultimately it comes down to each object. So if whatever market is really successful at the moment, let's just say the Warhol market, and there are 20 works at auction there, and 19 of them sell, you'd say, there's no bubble there, it's going strong. But if you were the person with the one Warhol that didn't sell, you'd go, the market sucks, I got screwed, you know, the bubble has burst, it's over. So these are unique, for the most part, objects with unique people, each with their own stake. And when most people ask me, what do you think of the art market? I think they mean, what about my stuff? And they come here looking at the booths to recalculate their net worth statements. And so it's too broad a question. But I understand why journalists and people who write about economics would ask it. Another question? In the back.
Oh, hi, it's Melanie here from the Art newspaper.
Another journalist. Here we go.
Sorry, it's the journalist. Thank you both for your time. I just wondered, David, you said that you don't support your artists at auction, and I understand you are paying and you're making a risk. But if you do buy, say, Warhol...
I support my wife. I support my kids.
Good idea.
That's support.
Good idea. If you do buy, say, Warhol, and you also happen to own lots of Warhols, then your risk is in some way less great than someone else's. So you are helping...
I don't have to pay for it?
It's their money, though, Melanie.
No, I'm just saying that it sets a price. It helps keep the prices of Warhols at a good level.
Let me tell you one thing, at least from what I see. I think that the Warhol market in general, which we're talking about specifically, does not need us to support anything. You know, there's plenty of support coming from everywhere in the world. People love the work, they buy it, they pay for it. You know, I wish I could buy more. You know, unfortunately, there's too many buyers for that case. So, again, yes, if I buy something, it's probably better for me than it would be for somebody that owns one piece. I agree with your comment, but at the same time, I still have to pay for it. I still put the money, it's risk. But I don't think that I would call it like I need to support it. Like I said, I want to buy the piece. I try to buy it, and in many cases, many cases, I actually don't, and I wish I did.
I think we have time for one more question. Jeremy, you have nothing to ask us? We have time for one more question. David, do you have a question for me?
When are we playing golf?
When are we playing golf? Sunday, right? If there's no more questions, then thank you for coming.
Thank
We
you.
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.